Marcus Bennett had always been a man defined by his ambitions. As a child growing up in South Central Los Angeles, he spent his days tinkering with broken appliances that others discarded, often building something new from their remnants. A defunct radio became a working speaker system. A broken fan turned into a cooling system for his mother's tiny kitchen. His hands were magic, and his mind, a labyrinth of curiosity and drive that wouldn't quit. When Marcus was accepted into MIT on a full-ride scholarship, his mother, Deborah, had cried in the doorway of their cramped apartment. She'd worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, to keep food on the table and the lights on. And now her son was stepping into a world far removed from the struggles they'd known. But Marcus never let her sacrifices go unappreciated. Each call home ended with the same promise: "I'm going to make sure you never have to work again, Ma." True to his word, Marcus excelled in his studies. By the time he graduated, he'd had offers from some of the most prestigious companies in the tech world. He chose SpaceX. The allure of working for a company that aimed to redefine humanity's relationship with the stars was irresistible. It wasn't just a job, it was a purpose. Now, at just 30 years old, Marcus had already been instrumental in developing several innovations for Elon Musk's ambitious Mars colonization program. He was one of the youngest lead engineers in SpaceX's history, with a reputation for being both relentless and visionary. His colleagues often joked that Marcus didn't just think outside the box, he reinvented the box, programmed it, and sent it into orbit. But success didn't insulate Marcus from the realities of the world he lived in. No matter how many patents he held or accolades he received, the color of his skin often dictated the first assumptions people made about him. It wasn't new. He'd learned to navigate those biases in high school, in college, and now, even as a professional at the top of his game. Every so often, a well-dressed Marcus would catch someone glancing suspiciously at him in an upscale store or see them clutch their purse tighter in an elevator. He'd smile through it, as he always did, but inside he burned. This day, however, was supposed to be different. "Take it for a spin," Elon had said casually during a meeting earlier that week, tossing Marcus a set of Tesla key fobs. "See how it feels. Give me your feedback before the board sees the prototype. You're the kind of mind that knows how to push limits." Marcus had been skeptical at first. Testing a Tesla prototype felt more like a publicity stunt than a task aligned with his work at SpaceX. But Elon was insistent, and there was something thrilling about being trusted with a car that no one else outside the company had driven. So, on his day off, Marcus slid into the driver's seat of the sleek, jet-black Tesla Roadster ZA car that looked like it had been sculpted rather than built. As he adjusted the seat and pressed the power button, the car hummed to life in near silence, the dashboard lighting up like the cockpit of a spaceship. "Let's see what you've got," he muttered with a grin, gripping the steering wheel. The streets of Palo Alto rolled by effortlessly as Marcus marveled at the car's capabilities. It wasn't just smooth, it was intuitive. At times it seemed to anticipate his actions before he made them, the AI subtly assisting his turns and monitoring the speed limits. Marcus couldn't resist imagining the endless possibilities this level of machine intelligence could bring to space exploration. He drove through the city, past glassy tech buildings and meticulously groomed parks, before taking the car out to the quieter suburban neighborhoods. He wanted to see how it performed in less predictable environments, narrow streets, intersections with limited visibility, the occasional jaywalker. The system didn't falter once, impressing him at every turn. But as Marcus slowed at a stop sign in one of these neighborhoods, his rearview mirror caught something that immediately set him on edge, flashing red and blue lights. He instinctively glanced at his speedometer, -23 mph in a 25 zone. He hadn't rolled through the stop sign, and the car's automated system wouldn't have let him even if he'd tried. He wasn't lost or making erratic turns. There was no reason for him to be pulled over. None, except the obvious. His chest tightened as he signaled and pulled over to the curb. This wasn't the first time he'd been stopped for what his mother had once described as driving while black. The last time it happened, he'd been in his early 20s, driving a beat-up Toyota Corolla on the way to an internship interview. That officer had accused him of looking like someone they were searching for. Marcus had been detained for over an hour before they let him go. He'd arrived late to the interview, shaken and humiliated, and hadn't gotten the job. Now, sitting in a prototype Tesla worth more than some homes, Marcus could already sense where this was headed. He reached for his wallet, and pulled out his driver's license and insurance card, setting them on the dashboard alongside the key fob. His hands remained in plain view, gripping the steering wheel. He'd learned to do this after his mother sat him down at 16 and explained how to act when not if he was stopped by the police. The officer approached slowly, his hand hovering near his holster. Marcus took in the man's expression through the side mirror, stern and guarded. This was a man who had already decided what kind of person he was dealing with. License and registration, the officer barked. Marcus forced a calm, neutral tone. I have them right here on the dashboard, officer. May I reach for them? The officer hesitated, his eyes narrowing. Slowly, Marcus handed over the documents. The officer glanced at them briefly, then stared at the car. This your vehicle? I'm test driving it for work. I'm an engineer at SpaceX. The officer snorted, his skepticism palpable. An engineer at SpaceX, huh? Driving a car like this through a neighborhood like this? Marcus bit back the wave of frustration that rose in his chest. Yes, sir. I'm gonna need to see proof of that, the officer said, gesturing toward the car's interior. Pop the trunk. Marcus hesitated. Is there a reason I'm being stopped? The officer's eyes hardened. Do I look like I owe you an explanation? Do it now. Marcus exhaled slowly, willing himself to remain composed. He pressed the trunk release, and the officer stepped away to examine the car. When he returned, his demeanor hadn't softened. Step out of the vehicle. Officer, I don't understand. Don't make me repeat myself. Marcus felt his pulse quicken, his hands clammy as he opened the door and stepped out. He stood on the curb, his six-a frame towering over the officer, though he made sure to keep his posture non-threatening. The officer circled the car, eyeing Marcus as if trying to decipher a code. You fit the description of someone we're looking for, he finally said. The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. Description of who, Marcus asked, his voice tightening despite his efforts to stay calm. The officer didn't answer. Instead, he gestured toward his patrol car. Turn around and put your hands on the hood. For a moment, Marcus froze. This wasn't happening, not again, not when he'd done nothing wrong. But the sight of the officer's hand drifting toward his weapon snapped him out of it. He turned slowly, placing his hands on the cold metal. His mind raced, thinking of his mother, his colleagues, and the humiliation of what would come next. As the officer radioed for backup, Marcus's thoughts lingered on a single question: would this nightmare ever end? Marcus stood by the police cruiser, his hands pressed against the hood, the metal cold beneath his fingertips despite the midday sun. He could hear the officer shuffling behind him, muttering into his radio. Each word sent a fresh wave of unease through Marcus. He didn't know who this officer was describing, but he knew it wasn't him. Still, Marcus had heard too many stories that started this way and ended with tragedy. Stay right there, the officer snapped. As if Marcus had a choice. His heart pounded, but he remained silent, knowing that any word, any movement, could be misinterpreted. The sound of tires crunching on gravel pulled Marcus's attention toward the street. Another patrol car arrived, its flashing lights adding to the spectacle. Two more officers stepped out, one male and one female. Both looked at Marcus, then at the gleaming Tesla parked nearby, and exchanged a glance that said everything. This doesn't add up. The first officer, whose badge read Officer Johnson, approached the newcomers with a mix of authority and frustration. Got a suspicious one here. Claims he's a SpaceX engineer. Driving this thing, he said, jerking his thumb toward the car. The female officer frowned. Suspicious how? Doesn't seem to belong here, Johnson said flatly. The implication hung in the air like a bad smell. The second officer tilted his head toward Marcus. Sir, do you mind explaining what you're doing in this neighborhood? Marcus took a deep breath, trying to steady his voice. As I told Officer Johnson, I'm an engineer at SpaceX. I was test driving a Tesla prototype for work. And you have proof of that? The female officer asked, her tone less confrontational but still skeptical. Marcus gestured toward the key fob and his work ID, which were still on the dashboard where he had placed them earlier. My ID is in the car, along with the key fob. It'll confirm everything. But before anyone could verify his claim, Johnson waved them off. Doesn't matter. This guy's fitting the description of someone who's been breaking into cars around here. Marcus's patience thinned. Breaking into cars. While driving a car like this, his voice was firm now, his frustration slipping through despite his best efforts. Don't get smart with me, Johnson snapped, stepping closer. I don't care how fancy that ride is. You're acting suspicious. Marcus clenched his jaw. Acting suspicious? I'm standing here with my hands up, cooperating fully. What exactly makes me suspicious? The female officer shifted uncomfortably, clearly realizing how flimsy the justification sounded. Maybe we should check his ID, she suggested, but Johnson ignored her. Instead, Johnson grabbed Marcus's arm, twisting it behind his back. I'm taking you in for questioning. What Marcus's voice rose, his composure slipping. You can't just... I said, don't get smart, Johnson barked, tightening his grip. The female officer stepped forward. Hold on, Johnson. Let's verify his story first. If he's telling the truth. You want to babysit him? Be my guest, Johnson said dismissively, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. But I'm not taking any chances. The cold steel snapped around Marcus's wrists, and a wave of anger and humiliation washed over him. A small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk, drawn by the flashing lights and raised voices. Some held up their phones, recording the scene. Marcus caught snippets of their murmurs. What did he do? Why's he in cuffs? Looks like another one of those cases. His chest tightened. He hated being reduced to a spectacle, an object of pity or curiosity. He thought of his mother, who had always warned him that his achievements wouldn't shield him from these moments. She'd been right. No matter how far he'd come, to some people, he'd always be a threat. Officer Johnson, Marcus said carefully, his voice measured, you're making a mistake. I haven't done anything wrong. If you check the car's onboard system, you'll see. Save it for the station, Johnson interrupted, shoving Marcus toward the back of the patrol car. The female officer hesitated but ultimately stepped aside, clearly uneasy but unwilling to override her colleague. Marcus was forced into the back seat, the door slamming shut with a finality that made his stomach churn. From the back seat, Marcus could see his Tesla still parked on the curb, the sunlight glinting off its polished surface. He knew that every moment of this interaction had been captured by the car's cameras, its advanced AI recording everything from the initial stop to the handcuffing. The car's tech didn't just monitor driving, it monitored everything around it. Marcus closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He could already see the headlines: SpaceX engineer arrested in racial profiling incident. His career, his reputation, his dignity, all of it felt as though it was slipping away in real time. But even as despair threatened to consume him, another thought pushed through the noise: this isn't over. Not yet. Elon Musk was rarely surprised. In his world, surprises were problems to be anticipated and solved, preferably before they happened. But when he scrolled through his Twitter feed that evening and saw Marcus Bennett trending, his heart sank. The first video he clicked showed a crowd gathering on a tree-lined suburban street, their phones pointed at the scene. In the center of it all was Marcus, handcuffed and standing beside a police cruiser, his face tight with anger and restraint. The caption read, racial profiling? SpaceX engineer arrested while test driving Tesla prototype. Elon tapped his desk impatiently as he played the next video. This one showed Officer Johnson forcefully pushing Marcus into the back of the squad car, ignoring his protests. In the background, someone could be heard saying, "That's messed up. He didn't do anything." Elon leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. Marcus wasn't just any employee. He was one of the brightest minds at SpaceX, a man who had contributed to some of the company's most groundbreaking achievements. But beyond that, Marcus was a friend. They'd shared long nights brainstorming, cracking jokes, and dreaming up ideas that sounded impossible until they weren't. And now Marcus's name was being dragged through the mud because some cop had decided that a black man in a Tesla didn't add up. Elon picked up his phone and dialed quickly. "Get me Sarah from legal," he said to his assistant. Minutes later, Sarah Marshall, Tesla's head of legal affairs, appeared on the video call. Her expression was serious, her usual composed demeanor slightly rattled. "Elon, I've seen the footage. It's bad." "How bad?" Elon asked, though he already knew the answer. It's all over social media. People are calling it racial profiling. If this blows up any further, it could damage both Tesla and SpaceX. But more importantly, it's unjust. Elon frowned. What about the car's data? That Roadstar Z has the most advanced AI we've ever developed. It should have captured everything. It did, Sarah confirmed. The cameras recorded the entire interaction, including audio. We also have the vehicle telemetry, which shows Marcus wasn't speeding or breaking any laws. He even came to a full stop at the sign before he was pulled over. Good, Elon said, his mind sharpening. We're going to use that data to clear his name. I want a team on this immediately. Sarah hesitated. Elon, are you sure? This could escalate into a bigger fight with the police department. They might claim we're invading their jurisdiction or interfering with law enforcement. Let them, Elon replied firmly. This isn't just about Marcus. It's about showing that technology can hold people accountable, even those who think they're above the law. Sarah nodded. I'll get the ball rolling. But you should prepare for backlash. The police unions won't take this lightly. Elon ended the call and leaned forward, his fingers steepled. He wasn't just angry, he was motivated. Marcus had worked tirelessly to make Tesla and SpaceX the companies they were today. Now it was time for Elon to do the same for him. Hours later, Marcus sat in a cold interrogation room, his wrists aching from the cuffs that had only just been removed. His mind was a storm of anger and exhaustion, but he refused to let it show. The last thing he wanted was to give Officer Johnson or anyone else the satisfaction of seeing him break. The door opened, and a different officer entered, this one older, with a weary expression that suggested he was more accustomed to paperwork than field work. Mr. Bennett, the officer began, sitting across from him. You're being held on suspicion of vehicle theft and possible involvement in a string of local break-ins. Marcus stared at him, incredulous. Vehicle theft? That car is a Tesla prototype. I was test driving it for work. The officer sighed. Do you have proof of that? Yes, Marcus said, his voice clipped. My ID is in the car, along with the key fob. The car itself has onboard cameras that recorded everything. Check the footage. The officer nodded slowly, but it was clear he wasn't entirely convinced. We'll look into it. In the meantime, we need you to stay put. As the officer left the room, Marcus leaned back in his chair, his frustration mounting. It was as if his words were being filtered through a lens of doubt, his credibility questioned at every turn. He wasn't just fighting to clear his name, he was fighting the perception that his very existence was suspicious. Minutes felt like hours as Marcus waited. He thought about calling his mother but stopped himself. She didn't need this stress, not after everything she'd already sacrificed for him. Instead, he closed his eyes and tried to focus on the one thing that gave him hope: the Tesla's data. At the same time, Elon was in Tesla's data center, surrounded by engineers and analysts. On a massive screen, the footage from Marcus's drive played out in high definition. It showed him driving cautiously through the neighborhood, stopping at the sign, and pulling over the moment the flashing lights appeared. The audio captured every word of the interaction, from Marcus's calm compliance to Officer Johnson's escalating aggression. It was damning evidence, and Elon felt a surge of vindication. Compile this footage, he instructed. Include timestamps and telemetry data. I want this airtight. One of the engineers hesitated. Are we really planning to release this publicly? It could stir up a lot of controversy. That's the point, Elon said bluntly. If we don't stand up now, we're complicit. Marcus isn't just an employee, he's a human being who was treated unfairly. We have the power to do something about it, and we're going to. The team worked through the night, compiling the data into a comprehensive report. By morning, they had everything they needed: a detailed timeline of events, raw footage from the Tesla's cameras, and a summary of the vehicle's flawless performance during the drive. Elon reviewed it all before issuing his final order. Send this to the press, and make sure it reaches Marcus's lawyer. Back at the police station, Marcus was startled when the door to the interrogation room burst open. A young officer stepped in, looking flustered. Mr. Bennett, you're free to go. Marcus frowned. What changed? The officer hesitated. Your boss, Elon Musk, released a statement with video evidence proving you weren't at fault. It's everywhere. The chief said to let you go immediately. Marcus's heart raced as he stood, the weight of the past hours lifting slightly. He was free, but the sting of what had happened remained. As he stepped out of the station, the bright morning sun hit his face, and he was greeted by a swarm of reporters. Cameras flashed, microphones jutted toward him, and voices shouted questions. How does it feel to be released? Do you plan to press charges? Did Elon Musk personally intervene? Marcus raised a hand to quiet them, his voice steady but firm. I'm grateful to be free, but this isn't just about me. This is about accountability and making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. That's the fight we need to focus on. In the crowd, Marcus spotted a familiar face, Elon, standing near a Tesla Model X with his arms crossed in a determined look. Their eyes met, and Marcus nodded in silent gratitude. The fight wasn't over, but at least now he wasn't facing it alone. By the time Marcus arrived home from the police station, he was exhausted, emotionally drained, and struggling to process the whirlwind events of the past 24 hours. Yet there was no reprieve. His phone buzzed incessantly with calls, texts, and notifications. Social media was ablaze with his name, and the words racial profiling Tesla and SpaceX had turned his quiet life into a national headline. He sat down on the edge of his couch, his thoughts racing. The very technology he'd helped develop had exposed the injustice he endured, and while he felt a sense of vindication, it was overshadowed by the humiliation of the experience. It wasn't just the handcuffs or the questions about his legitimacy, it was the way the officers had looked at him, as if no amount of achievement could strip away their prejudice. His phone buzzed again. This time it was an incoming call from his mother. Marcus Deborah's voice was a mix of relief and worry. I just saw the news. Are you okay? Why didn't you call me? Marcus exhaled, his head dropping into his free hand. I didn't want you to worry, Ma. Well, too late for that, she replied, her tone firm but tinged with the warmth that had carried him through so many tough times. I'm proud of you for how you handled it, baby. But I swear, if I ever see that officer. Ma, Marcus interrupted, a faint smile tugging at his lips despite everything. It's handled now. Elon's team got me out, and the video proves I didn't do anything wrong. There was a pause. I know you've always worked hard, Marcus. But remember, being right doesn't always mean being safe. Just promise me you'll be careful, okay? I promise, he said, his voice soft. I love you, Ma. I love you too, baby, she said before hanging up. The call left Marcus feeling both comforted and more frustrated. His mother had always been his rock, but her worry reminded him of how deeply rooted this problem was. No amount of evidence or advocacy could erase the centuries of systemic bias that black people like him had to face daily. Meanwhile, Elon Musk was navigating a storm of his own. The release of the Tesla footage had gone viral within hours. News outlets picked it up, and the public was sharply divided. Some praised Tesla for using technology to fight injustice, while others accused the company of overstepping its bounds and interfering with law enforcement. Elon, we're getting hit from all sides, Sarah Marshall said during a video call with the Tesla executive team. The police union is accusing us of setting a dangerous precedent by undermining their authority. There are also concerns from privacy advocates who think this could lead to surveillance overreach. Elon leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Let them talk, he said finally. This isn't about taking down the police, it's about accountability. If our technology can expose misconduct, then it's doing exactly what it was designed to do. Sarah nodded but looked skeptical. It's not just the unions and the privacy watchdogs. Some investors are worried this could damage our reputation. Elon's eyes narrowed. If standing up for what's right damages our reputation, then maybe we're not the kind of company I want to lead. The room fell silent. Elon's voice carried weight, and while his team respected his convictions, they knew the backlash wasn't going to fade overnight. Marcus decided to avoid social media for the rest of the day, but the world outside his apartment was another matter entirely. By mid-afternoon, a news van had parked across the street, and reporters were knocking on his door. He ignored them at first, hoping they'd lose interest, but their persistence was unrelenting. Finally, Marcus stepped out, determined to set the record straight. Cameras flashed as soon as he appeared, and microphones were thrust toward him. "Mr. Bennett, how do you feel about Tesla's involvement in your case?" one reporter shouted. "Do you believe this incident reflects broader issues in law enforcement?" another asked. Marcus raised a hand for silence, his voice steady despite the chaos. "I'm grateful for Tesla and SpaceX's support, especially Elon Musk's decision to release the footage. It's clear that technology played a crucial role in revealing the truth. But this isn't just about me. This is about a system that allows people like me to be seen as threats simply for existing." The reporters scribbled furiously, their cameras capturing every word. "What do you plan to do next?" someone called from the back of the crowd. Marcus hesitated, then spoke with conviction. "I'm going to keep doing what I've always done, working hard, building a better future. But I also plan to use this experience to advocate for change. No one should have to go through what I did, no matter who they are." As he turned to head back inside, Marcus felt a surge of both relief and responsibility. His words had sparked something, but he knew they were just the beginning. The national conversation around Marcus's arrest quickly snowballed. Civil rights groups hailed the incident as a wake-up call about the role of technology in combating racial bias. Social media campaigns like Justice for Marcus and Drive While Black trended for days, drawing attention to countless similar stories from people across the country. However, not everyone saw Marcus as a victim. On certain talk shows and online forums, critics framed the incident as a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. They argued that the officer had been doing his job and that Marcus's behavior could have been misinterpreted. "I'm tired of this narrative," Marcus said one evening while talking to his closest friend and fellow SpaceX engineer, David Chang. "Why is it always on us to justify our existence? Why is their misunderstanding always our burden to bear?" David nodded solemnly. "Because it's easier for them to blame you than to admit the system's broken. But look at what's happening now, Marcus. You're forcing people to have a conversation they've been avoiding for decades." Marcus sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I just wanted to drive the damn car. I didn't ask to be anyone's symbol." "You didn't," David said, his tone firm. "But sometimes the fight finds you whether you want it or not." Elon Musk watched the public discourse unfold with a mixture of pride and frustration. He had no regrets about supporting Marcus, but he knew the fight wasn't over. The data from the Tesla had done more than clear Marcus's name. It had shown the world how technology could be used to hold power accountable. Yet the backlash was mounting. Police unions were threatening legal action against Tesla, claiming the release of the footage had violated department protocols. Privacy advocates were calling for tighter regulations on vehicle data, arguing that it could be misused in the wrong hands. Elon wasn't deterred. In fact, he saw an opportunity to push for systemic change. "Let's issue a public statement," he told Sarah during another late-night meeting. "We'll propose a new initiative, Tesla's commitment to making all vehicle data accessible in cases of legal disputes. We'll call it transparent justice." Sarah blinked. "You're suggesting we turn this into a company policy?" "Exactly," Elon said. "We need to show people that technology isn't the enemy, it's a tool. And if it can make law enforcement more transparent, then it's a tool worth using." As Marcus scrolled through the headlines the next morning, he saw the statement from Tesla. Introducing transparent justice, Tesla's pledge to support accountability. Beneath it was a quote from Elon: "Technology has the power to reveal the truth. It's time we use that power to build a more just society." Marcus felt a surge of pride and gratitude. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to smile. This wasn't the path he had envisioned for himself, but maybe, just maybe, it was the one he was meant to take. The evening news was a barrage of heated debates. Cable channels hosted pundits on both sides of the controversy. On one screen, a civil rights activist passionately spoke about how Marcus Bennett's case was a glaring example of systemic bias. On another, a police union representative sternly defended Officer Johnson's actions, insisting that the officer was simply erring on the side of caution. Marcus watched the coverage from his couch, his emotions swinging between exhaustion and indignation. His phone buzzed constantly. Some calls and messages were supportive, others less so. Anonymous numbers sent him threats, accusing him of trying to ruin a good officer's career. But amid the noise, there were also heartfelt messages from people who shared their own stories of profiling and injustice. Each message was a reminder of the larger fight his situation had sparked. Later that evening, Marcus's friend and mentor, Dr. Rebecca Shaw, called. Dr. Shaw had been instrumental in guiding Marcus early in his career, encouraging him to use his intellect to push boundaries. Now her voice carried both encouragement and a gentle warning. "Marcus, this is bigger than just you," she said. "You're not just fighting for yourself, you're standing for so many others. But you need to prepare yourself. The backlash isn't going away." "I know," Marcus replied, pacing his living room. "I've been getting threats all day. It's infuriating. I didn't ask to be in this position, Dr. Shaw." "I know you didn't," she said. "But you're here now, and if anyone is equipped to handle this, it's you." Her words carried weight, and Marcus knew she was right. Still, he couldn't shake the frustration that his life had been upended simply because of someone else's prejudice. Meanwhile, Elon Musk's Transparent Justice initiative was gaining traction. Social media erupted with praise for the idea of using Tesla's vehicle data to promote accountability. The hashtag Transparent Justice trended alongside Justice for Marcus. But not everyone welcomed the idea. The police union held a press conference the following morning. Their spokesperson stood at a podium, flanked by uniformed officers. "We appreciate the importance of transparency," he began, his tone measured, but Tesla's actions in releasing this footage set a dangerous precedent. Law enforcement must be able to do their jobs without the constant threat of being undermined by corporations. Elon Musk watched the press conference from his office, unimpressed. He leaned back in his chair and turned to Sarah Marshall, who sat across from him. "They're doubling down." "They are," Sarah agreed. "And they'll likely pursue legal action. They'll argue that releasing the footage was a violation of privacy or an obstruction of justice." Elon smirked. "Let them try. The footage isn't their property, it's Tesla's. If they want to go to court, we'll show them how accountability works." Sarah hesitated. "We'll need to tread carefully. If we escalate this too far, we risk alienating some of our key partners." "Sarah," Elon said firmly, "if our partners are okay with racial profiling, then they're not the kind of partners we need." That afternoon, Marcus received an email from Elon himself. The subject line read, "We've got your back." Marcus opened it, his eyes scanning the brief but impactful message. "Marcus, the footage cleared your name, but this fight isn't over. Tesla and SpaceX are fully committed to supporting you and ensuring this situation creates lasting change. If you're open to it, I'd like to meet soon to discuss how we can amplify your voice and use this moment to push for real reform. Stay strong. Elon." Marcus read the email twice, his chest tightening. Elon Musk didn't just see him as another employee, he saw him as a human being who deserved justice. For the first time since the incident, Marcus felt like he wasn't alone in this battle. He hit reply and began typing, "Thank you, Elon. Let's talk." The courtroom buzzed with quiet tension as people filed into their seats. The case had captured national attention, and every seat in the gallery was filled. Cameras were stationed outside the courthouse, capturing the arrival of key figures. Protesters waved signs with slogans like "Justice for Marcus" and "End Racial Profiling." Now the atmosphere was electric, a palpable mix of anger, hope, and anticipation. Marcus Bennett sat at the plaintiff's table, his back straight, his face composed. Beside him was his attorney, a seasoned civil rights litigator named Angela Morris. She was known for her fiery rhetoric and unshakable resolve, and Marcus had felt a sense of relief when Elon Musk introduced them. The defendant's side was occupied by representatives of the local police department, led by their own high-profile lawyer, a man infamous for spinning police misconduct cases into tales of justified actions. Officer Johnson sat among them, his expression unreadable, though his clenched jaw betrayed his discomfort. Angela leaned toward Marcus. "Remember, no matter how much they twist this, the facts are on our side. Let them squirm under the weight of the truth." Marcus nodded, gripping the edge of the table. He had replayed the incident in his head countless times, and now it was time to face it head-on. The judge entered, and the courtroom stood before being seated again. The trial began with opening statements, the police department's lawyer insisting that Officer Johnson had acted in good faith, citing the tense environment of the neighborhood as justification for his actions. Angela, in contrast, painted a vivid picture of a man unfairly targeted because of his race. "This case isn't just about Marcus Bennett," she declared. It's about a pattern of behavior and ingrained bias that leads to unjust profiling and harassment. Today we have the chance to challenge that. She paused, scanning the faces in the room. And thanks to technology, we have irrefutable evidence of what happened. When the Tesla footage was presented, the courtroom fell silent. The video played on a large screen, showing Marcus driving carefully through the neighborhood, stopping fully at the sign, and pulling over as soon as the flashing lights appeared. The audio captured every moment of the interaction: Officer Johnson's brusque tone, his escalating demands, and Marcus's calm compliance. The timestamps confirmed that Marcus had done nothing wrong. The telemetry data, presented by a Tesla engineer, further demonstrated that the car's automated systems had adhered to all traffic laws. As the video ended, a murmur rippled through the gallery. Even those who had initially doubted Marcus's claims seemed shaken by the clarity of the evidence. Angela rose to her feet. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this isn't just Marcus's story. This is a story about accountability, about using technology to shine a light on injustice. The truth is in front of you. Now it's up to you to act on it. During cross-examination, Officer Johnson squirmed under Angela's pointed questions. Officer Johnson, Angela began, her tone sharp but measured. You claimed Marcus Bennett fit the description of a suspect. Can you describe that suspect? Johnson hesitated, his eyes darting toward his lawyer. Well, a black male, mid to late 20s. Angela cut him off. Marcus Bennett is 30 years old and driving a Tesla prototype valued at over $100,000. Does that sound like your suspect? Johnson faltered. It was a tense situation. I was trying to ensure everyone's safety. Angela's eyes narrowed. Safety? The video shows Mr. Bennett complying with every instruction you gave. What exactly about his behavior made you feel unsafe? The officer's silence spoke volumes. By the time the court adjourned for the day, it was clear the case had shifted dramatically in Marcus's favor. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had grown larger, and cheers erupted as Marcus emerged with Angela by his side. Elon Musk was there too, his presence a quiet but powerful reminder of the support Marcus had from one of the most influential figures in the tech world. He stepped forward, extending a hand. You did well in there. Marcus shook his hand, gratitude flashing in his eyes. Thanks to you. No, Elon replied, his voice firm. Thanks to the truth. As they walked to their cars, Marcus felt a new sense of hope. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time it felt like justice was within reach. The courtroom reconvened the next day, the air heavy with anticipation. The jury had deliberated overnight, and now their decision would be revealed. Marcus sat at the plaintiff's table, his hands clasped tightly together. On his left, Angela Morris radiated confidence, her steady presence reassuring him. To his right, Elon Musk sat quietly, a surprising but welcome figure in the courtroom. The room was packed, with spectators and reporters waiting to see how the case would end. The judge called the court to order, and the jury filed in, their expressions neutral. The foreperson rose, holding the verdict in hand. We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Marcus Bennett, she announced, her voice ringing clearly through the room. A wave of relief swept over Marcus, and he let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The courtroom erupted into a mix of cheers and applause, though the judge quickly called for decorum. Marcus glanced at Angela, who gave him a small nod of satisfaction, then at Elon, who clapped him on the shoulder. This isn't just a win for you, Elon said quietly. It's a win for anyone who's been in your shoes. Outside the courthouse, the scene was jubilant. Protesters turned celebrators held up signs that read "Victory for Justice and End Racial Profiling." Now news crews swarmed Marcus, microphones thrust toward him as reporters shouted questions. Marcus, what's next for you? One asked. Marcus paused, collecting his thoughts. This isn't just my victory, he said, his voice strong but measured. This is a message that the truth matters, that accountability matters, and that no one should be judged by the color of their skin. I'm grateful for the support I've received, but I know this is just the beginning. There's still so much work to do. As the cameras flashed, Marcus felt a sense of clarity. He hadn't chosen this fight, but it had chosen him, and now he was determined to use his platform to advocate for change. In the days that followed, the story continued to dominate headlines. The verdict sparked conversations about racial profiling, police reform, and the role of technology in ensuring justice. Social media was ablaze with hashtags like Justice for Marcus and Drive While Black, amplifying the voices of others who had endured similar experiences. Tesla's Transparent Justice initiative gained traction as well. Elon announced that Tesla would collaborate with civil rights organizations to develop policies ensuring vehicle data could be used responsibly in cases of misconduct. The company's commitment to transparency became a rallying cry, demonstrating how technology could be a force for good. Marcus, however, was focused on the future. He had been inundated with interview requests and speaking engagements, but he turned down most of them, choosing instead to focus on his work at SpaceX. For Marcus, returning to his passion, engineering solutions for a better future, was the best way to heal. A month after the verdict, Marcus was invited to speak at a national conference on technology and justice. It was a high-profile event attended by leaders in law enforcement, technology, and social advocacy. Despite his nerves, Marcus knew this was an opportunity he couldn't pass up. Standing at the podium, he looked out at the audience, his heart pounding. Then he began to speak. "When I was a kid," he started, "I didn't dream about standing in front of crowds. I dreamed about building things, about using my hands and my mind to create solutions. I became an engineer because I believed in progress, in the idea that we can make the world a better place through innovation." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "But a month ago, I learned that progress isn't just about what we build. It's about who we are as people. When I was wrongfully arrested, I was reminded that no matter how far I've come, there are systems in place that see my skin color before they see my achievements." The room was silent, every eye fixed on him. "Technology exposed the truth in my case," Marcus continued. "It cleared my name and held those in power accountable. But technology is just a tool. It's up to us to use it responsibly, to ensure it serves justice rather than perpetuates injustice." He took a deep breath. "I stand here today not just as an engineer, but as an advocate. We have the power to create a world where accountability is the norm, where no one has to live in fear of being judged unfairly. But it takes all of us engineers, activists, policymakers, and community leaders to make that happen." The audience erupted into applause as Marcus stepped back from the podium. In that moment, he realized the depth of his impact, not just as a victim of injustice, but as a catalyst for change. Months later, life had returned to a semblance of normalcy. Marcus resumed his work at SpaceX, throwing himself into a new project designing technology to aid in the colonization of Mars. Yet, he carried the lessons of his experience with him, weaving them into every aspect of his life. Elon Musk kept his word, too. Tesla's Transparent Justice initiative became a cornerstone of the company's public policy, inspiring other tech giants to adopt similar programs. Marcus and Elon remained close, their bond strengthened by the ordeal they had overcome together. One evening, as Marcus sat in his apartment reviewing blueprints for a new propulsion system, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Elon: "Dinner this week. Bring your ideas for that AI justice platform we talked about." Marcus smiled. The fight wasn't over, but he wasn't fighting alone. The story of Marcus Bennett had begun as one of injustice, but it became a story of resilience, innovation, and hope, a testament to what can happen when truth and technology collide.